On the morning of her traditional wedding, her uncle stood up in front of everyone and announced that she was about to ruin her life because she was marrying a driver. The words were not whispered. They were spoken boldly, confidently, as though he were saving her from disaster. The compound was already full, aunties in bright lace, elders seated beneath the decorated canopy, drummers adjusting their instruments, children running between chairs. The scent of cooked jollof rice drifted through the air, mixing with perfume and dust. Plastic chairs scraped against concrete. Generators hummed faintly in the background. It should have been a joyful morning, but tension moved quietly between the guests, unseen but felt. And in the middle of it all stood Daniel, quiet, composed, wearing a simple, well-pressed traditional outfit. No entourage, no expensive convoy, no display of wealth. Just a man about to marry the woman he loved. Ada stood beside him. Her veil was modest, her jewelry elegant but not excessive. She looked beautiful, but her eyes were restless, because she had heard the whispers all morning. Is this the best she could do? They say he drives for a transport company. A driver? Her father allowed this? The murmurs traveled faster than the music. Daniel heard them too, but his expression did not change. The ceremony began. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows beneath the canopy. Beads of sweat gathered at Daniel's temple, though his posture remained steady. Ada noticed. He was calm, but human. Kolonuts were presented. Prayers were said. The elders cleared their throats with authority. Then, just before the wine-carrying ritual, Ada's uncle rose from his seat. He did not ask permission. He simply stood. "My daughter," he said loudly, even though she was his niece. "Before this goes further, we must speak truth." The compound fell silent. "You are educated. You are from a respected family. And today you want to tie yourself to a man who drives people around for a living." A few relatives chuckled. Daniel lowered his eyes respectfully. Ada felt her chest tighten. Her father shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The uncle continued. "Marriage is not romance alone. It is provision. It is status. It is security. Can this young man provide what you are used to?" All eyes turned to Daniel. He did not rush to answer. He simply looked at Ada, not with fear, not with anger, but with a quiet question. She understood it. If this becomes too much, we can stop. Her fingers tightened around the small ceremonial fan in her hand. Then she lifted her chin. "I chose him," she said. For a moment, even the drummers paused their rhythm. It was not defiance in her voice. It was conviction. And that unsettled her uncle more than anger ever could. Not loudly, but clearly. The murmuring softened, though not completely. The uncle scoffed. "Love does not pay bills." Daniel finally spoke. His voice was calm, steady. "I understand your concern, sir." That was all. No defense, no explanation. And somehow, that calmness irritated the uncle more. The ritual continued, though the tension lingered in the air like heavy humidity before rainfall. A baby began to cry somewhere in the crowd, quickly hushed by its mother. No one laughed anymore. Even those who had mocked earlier now avoided direct eye contact. Something about Daniel's silence felt deliberate. When it was time for the groom's family to formally present themselves, Daniel stepped forward alone. No long line of relatives behind him. No dramatic display. Just him. Ada's cousin leaned toward another and whispered, "Even his people are embarrassed." Daniel heard it. Still, he remained composed. Then the head elder cleared his throat. "Does anyone object to this union?" It was a ceremonial question, mostly symbolic, but the uncle seized it. "Yes," he said. "I object to ignorance." Gasps rippled through the gathering. This young man may be kind, he may be humble, but humility does not build houses. Humility does not maintain lifestyle. He turned directly to Daniel. "How do you intend to care for her?" There it was, the public interrogation. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Then he answered softly, "The same way I have handled every responsibility entrusted to me." The answer confused some, annoyed others. It sounded incomplete, vague. The uncle spread his arms dramatically. "You see? No specifics, no proof, just confidence." A few guests nodded. Ada felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she did not release Daniel's hand. And then something shifted. A faint breeze lifted the edge of the canopy fabric. Some guests turned instinctively toward the gate, though they did not yet know why. From the back of the compound, near the gate, a movement began. One man stood up, then another, then three more. They were not dressed in flamboyant colors. Their outfits were understated but expensive, structured, corporate. They had arrived quietly earlier and taken seats without announcement. Now they walked forward. Measured steps, intentional. Whispers replaced the previous murmurs. "Who are they?" One of the men stopped a few steps behind Daniel and bowed his head slightly. "Chairman," he said respectfully. The word dropped like a stone into still water. The uncle's shoulders stiffened. Ada's father leaned forward slowly, as if trying to correct what he had just heard. Across the compound, phones subtly appeared in hands, not to mock, to record. Silence expanded. Another man stepped forward holding a slim leather folder. "The board meeting in Lagos has been postponed as instructed. The acquisition documents are ready for your signature after the ceremony." Ada's uncle blinked. "Chairman?" he repeated under his breath. The first man continued. "We apologize for intruding, sir, but the fleet expansion agreement requires final confirmation. The Port Authority will not wait." Fleet, Port Authority, agreement. The words began assembling themselves in the minds of the guests. Someone near the front whispered the name of a logistics company, one of the largest freight and transport corporations in the region, a company whose trucks dominated highways across 3 countries, a company recently featured in business news for acquiring 2 international shipping contracts. The company Daniel owned, not as an employee, as founder, as majority shareholder, as chairman. The uncle's mouth opened slightly, closed, opened again, but no sound came out. Daniel finally turned fully toward Ada's family. There was no arrogance in his posture, no smirk, no gloating, just quiet steadiness. "I started as a driver," he said calmly. "Years ago, I never hid that." He looked at Ada. "But I needed to know I wasn't marrying pride." No accusation followed, no raised voice, just truth. And sometimes truth, spoken softly, carries more weight than a public disgrace. The words were gentle, yet heavier than any insult. Ada's grip tightened. Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. She had chosen him when he was just a driver, and she was choosing him now. Daniel faced the elders and bowed respectfully. "I hold no anger," he said. "Your concerns were valid. A man must prove himself." The uncle looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. All his earlier volume had dissolved into stunned silence. Daniel did not demand apologies. He did not list his assets. He did not mention the fleet of trucks, the warehouses, the contracts. He simply turned back to Ada. "If you still wish to continue," he said softly. She answered without hesitation. "I chose you before today." A murmur passed through the guests again, but this time it was different. It was not mockery. It was realization. Respect. The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where there had been laughter, there was now humility. Where there had been pride, there was reflection. Ada's uncle remained seated, eyes lowered. No public apology, no dramatic scene, just the weight of consequence. And sometimes, that is heavier than punishment. When Daniel and Ada finally stepped forward as husband and wife, there was applause. But the loudest statement had already been made without shouting. Character had been tested. Pride had been exposed. Love had been chosen without status. And wealth, revealed without vengeance, had simply confirmed what mattered most. As they walked away from the canopy together, Daniel leaned slightly toward her. "Are you overwhelmed?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm certain." Behind them, the guests slowly rose, not in shock now, but in respect. And for the first time that day, the drums began to play without tension. The rhythm was slower now, richer, as though the music itself had been waiting for clarity. Behind them, pride had fallen quietly. Ahead of them, something steadier had begun. But pride does not only reveal itself at weddings. Sometimes it shows up in boardrooms, at dinner parties, in rooms where the powerful believe no one is watching. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who owns everything. If you think today's humiliation was painful, wait until you see what happened to the guests who mocked a maid at their own party.